Good morning, Jonathan.
Hey Liz, you hearing me?
I was muted. Yes, you're good to go.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Dean. You're not in Puerto Rico. Oh, Dean can't hear me yet. Dean, now I'm testing you. Can you hear us? Dean. Dean, 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 Dean. Okay, we're going to chat. Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Excellent. Nice to see you, Adam.
Yeah, you too. I don't know that I've used this platform yet, WebEx, so always discovering new ones.
Yes, I think it's taking a little while for people to join because I think it's new for a lot of people. Could the team check in with Kathy for me? Dean, I'm still wondering if you can hear me. Oh, there's Kathy. That's great. We'll wait just a couple more minutes, just because it's a new platform. Dean, I'm still wondering if you can hear me. Dean Moberg. Shoot.
Can you send them an email, Liz?
Yeah. And if folks could give us a thumbs up that the audio is working for most peeps, that would be helpful. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so it might just be Dean. And Jen, also, could you work with Dean as well?
Yes, I just reached out to.
Okay, great. Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. It's time to get started, I think. Hey, Lisa Phipps. Good morning. For those of you that don't know Lisa Phipps, she is the Coastal Program Manager at DLCD. Lisa, you may have the wrong link. I'm not sure if you're supposed to be a panelist. Yep.
Well,
and so
you know
Jen-
why? You know
Why?
why? Because I just said to, I'm not sure who I was talking to, but at Planning and Innovation, I said, all I can do is chat. And then they put me in.
Oh, okay.
So I erroneously asked to be put in, is that what you're saying to me?
Okay. Okay,
Boot
excellent.
me out.
Okay, hey, Jen, will you boot Lisa out? I think, thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that. Okay, great. Okay, I think we're gonna get started. It's time to go. It's nice to see all your faces. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Okay, welcome. Welcome. I think everyone can hear and you're using a new platform and I appreciate that effort. Welcome to the second meeting. I will kick us off by showing our group agreements. Again, thanks for keeping your video on, unless of course you're having bandwidth or other issues. We greatly appreciate it. It helps build connection. And thank you also for navigating WebEx. Jen is going to quickly go over all the functions of WebEx since it's new to many people. Jen?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. Today we will be using WebEx for our meeting. If you are familiar with Teams, you will find that WebEx offers similar features. You can turn on your camera by clicking on the camera icon. You can also mute and unmute yourself, raise your hand and lower it by clicking on the hand icon. Additionally, you have the option to send private message or public chats to the group. Thank you.
Okay, great. You can also chat Jen publicly, privately, and also email her if you have issues. We're going to be monitoring all of the ways that you can reach us. Okay, so today this is our agenda. The chair will welcome us and Jason and I will talk for a little while. We'll stop for questions after each of the items you see on the agenda. And after I'm talking about Natural Climate Solutions Workforce Development and Training Program Study, We'll have about a 10-minute Miro board exercise similar to last meeting. And then we'll transition to listening to our guest speaker, Adam Moreno, who you see on with you today. Adam will give a deeper introduction to himself then. But Adam, would you like to go ahead and say hi to everyone?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thanks for having me. Super excited. I'll talk more when it's my turn.
Okay, that sounds great. Just so that you know, what you write on the Miro board today, both Miro boards, we have two, will be coalesced and compiled and posted with the meeting minutes on the website. All right, Kathy, would you like to welcome everyone?
Yeah, happy to. This is an important body of work for the Oregon Climate Action Commission. So great to have you all here, and really looking forward to all the different the advice and counsel that the commission will get relative to all the different work streams we have going on for the coming year. Yeah, so let's get going.
Would you like to facilitate the question?
Sure. So
Yeah.
we thought we'd kick things off with just a icebreaker of what folks think. What is it that's telling you it's spring, wherever you're working from. For me, that it seemed to sneak up on me because all of a sudden there were little leaves on a few things, and then everything's fully leafed out. So I feel like I got a little bit of it got a little bit of a jump start on me. Others want to share. That'd be great.
Well, for me, it's the smell of Daphne. I have a Daphne plant by my back door, and that's like one of the very first things that happens. That and the birds start to come back.
Absolutely.
The birds are like what give me hope.
my Daphne is another piece. I agree with that. That's awesome. And just jump in whenever you don't feel like you have to be called on.
For me, it's daffodils.
Forest.
When I hear, I'm hearing an echo. Hold on. Okay, I think that's better. When I see the first move come out, and also a lot of the Portland markets start back up in spring.
Nice. Yeah.
For me, it's just colors returning to the landscape.
For me, it's the first fiddlehead that pops up. Oh, Megan.
For me, in Central Oregon, it's hopefully no more hard freezes.
For me, it's all the wildflowers, so the trilliums in Forest Park and the wildflowers in the gorge.
Trilliums are a good one.
Along the lines of no more freezes, for me, it's gardening. And 2 days ago, I was visiting an organic farm in Josephine County. And I always ask farmers what their favorite tomato variety is. And every farmer I ask has a different favorite. And this farmer, her favorite was a variety called Siskiyou Orange, which is an heirloom variety that you can't find anymore, but she saves the seeds, and she gave me a little transplant. So trying something new this year. Siskiyou Orange.
Nice. Speaking of gardening, I know it's spring because I am schlepping all the biomass my master gardener wife has put into the trailer to Lane Forest Products, selling it to them, then turning around and buying it back in compost and then bringing it back home. That's how I know it's spring.
Nice.
Pretty good business model.
I want the full list of all the favorite tomatoes, Dean.
Yeah, this is Mike in Parkdale. I farm predominantly fruit. So for me, we get a lot of snow in Parkdale. So when the snow starts to go enough, we can get out in the orchard easier. And when the buds start to swell, and when the critical temperature for bud death goes up to about the 25, 26 degrees, that's when we really, spring is here and we really start to worry.
It's very specific. I love that.
I know. I love how scientific his response was. Mine's way less casual. I love just seeing all the little baby calves. I live here in Idaho, and so there's a bunch of just baby calves sprinkling the fields, and then in early spring we have these little tiny, teeny tiny, like hummingbird-sized yellow birds, and I actually don't fully know what their name is. I think that they're goldfinches, but they're my favorite. So they come out early spring.
That's awesome.
I live down here in Sacramento, California. So for me, it's when the orange tree in my backyard starts blossoming. And so it just smells super sweet in my backyard. And then we just get a ton of doves and pigeons that love to nest around our house for whatever reason. So that too.
Orange blossoms are so great. Is there anyone who hasn't gone and would like to?
Yeah, I can hop in. I would say for me, it signifies for spring is I'm a big backpacker and camper, so all the permits like open up for spring, and you got to be like on your computer at 7 a.m. to try to get sites, which I don't know if I like the process, but I'm participating in it. So yeah.
That's awesome.
I have a flicker that has been going after my house.
That's a good one.
I noticed this morning that the flicker has a friend now too. So.
Oh, then all his banging worked.
Yeah, exactly.
Finally found a friend with all the banging. That's great.
Yeah. Although I've been banging on the wall too. So.
All right. Thank you. Last call for spring things.
Seeing trillium too in the forest by my house, and I'm loving there's some of them that are purple, which is amazing.
I have a couple in my yard and I was worried they were gone, and I was like, where are you? And then it popped up yesterday. So I agree, it's a good signal. Well, thank you, everyone.
I'm sorry, Megan, I missed what you said was purple.
Purple trillium.
Oh, nice. Very
beautiful.
Nice. Yeah.
Okay. We'll move along. Thank you. That was great. Okay. Kathy, you have a couple of slides.
Yeah, thanks. So for those of you that attended the commission meeting a couple weeks ago, we did notice that we're taking public comment on project ideas, as in particular some questions that we have from the public about how we invest, if we're so lucky, the next tranche of National and Working Lands funds. And in particular, wanted to get input from folks on the relative priority of the criteria that are included in House Bill 3409. And you can find those in section 54(3). That's specifically what we're interested in. Ideas about the types of activities that you think would be in particular important for us to be investing in, as well as the types of investments. And we have a number of options that we can invest in: technical assistance, incentives for landowners, and research is also one of the eligible items. And then, you know, if you have thoughts about what part of the state maybe needs most attention, and obviously all those things kind of intersect a little bit. So, so we'd love to get comments, and the deadline for getting those is the 2nd of May, and we'll summarize all of that input and provide that to the commission. Liz is working with the fund agencies, and hopefully this summer we'll hear proposals from the fund agencies, and this input will give food for thought for what that proposal looks like. and to the commission about how we advise the fund agencies about their proposals.
Kathy, it looks like Ellen has a question.
Great. Sorry, I can't see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. So 3409, section 54(3), there's 3 levels of criteria. I mean, there's sort of bigger picture, and then there keep being subsets. Do you want us to, how do you want us to prioritize those criteria, sort of, because it's kind of like apples and oranges, or it's big, medium, and then very specific. So I'm on the OECD Natural and Wildlands committee, and we weren't quite sure what you guys wanted.
Well, I think we're throwing open a fairly broad question. So
okay,
I would say,
all right,
what do you want to tell us?
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Out of that.
Great.
Liz, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that is right. Oopsies. There you go. Sorry.
And then just to remind folks, I think we talked about this a little bit at our last meeting. We do have a position that's identified or an area of experience that's identified in House Bill 3409 that we have not been able to fill on this advisory committee, and that is the environmental justice lived or learned experience. So we're still trying to find a way to fill that area of expertise or learned experience, and would love to have any input or assistance from the folks that are on the advisory committee about folks that might be able to fill that area of input. And the environmental justice community definition is pretty broad for Oregon, and includes a number of areas of expertise. So just, anything you all can do to help us, whether you do it directly or you send an email to Liz or I about how to reach out, who we might reach out to see if they would be willing to participate in this group.
Great. Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah. Ellen, do you still have your hand up for?
Oh,
or do you
sorry,
have
I'm
it?
not used to this. Okay.
No, no worries.
Sure. Okay, thanks.
We're all getting used to this, so thank you. Okay. All right, so some housekeeping and some more updates. We have created a couple of web pages on the commission website. I emailed you all with that information. Jason is going to pop the link to the commission website in the chat if you want to go take a look right now. If you navigate across the top menu and hover over the words natural and working lands, 2 new pages appear. A committee page where your names and bios will live soon, and a meeting page where you'll be able to view the meeting records and access material shared. We are still creating a resources page, and we'll continually update that as we create materials for this new effort. I also sent you an email letting you know that all state agencies received additional guidance on how to run virtual public meetings, and we would also like to adhere to ODO's best practices. So we moved the meetings to WebEx, and they will be recorded, and the public may view the meeting via the public link by the agenda online. And comments from the public on topics discussed among the committee will be taken through the commission, and we will share comments with the committee. Last meeting, there were great questions about whether you should send us resources, and the questions centered on categories of research related to nature-based mitigation and climate impacts to your sectors or land types, and we would love that. We have an ever-evolving literature review document, and we will also work to organize helpful resources for you all and the public as we are able. We would also love photos from all of you, meaningful photos in your work, representing what you do on the landscape, representing the land types you advocate for. We're working with our sister agencies to build a library here, but this is a new program at Odo. And so being able to flash you photos on our slides that are meaningful to you would be so fabulous. So please send them our way. And then lastly, we noticed last meeting, and we loved it, that folks felt safe to ask all the questions and provide concerns in the whiteboard format, that may be more comfortable like doing so in that format rather than verbally sometimes. So at the beginning of each meeting, we're going to open a questions or suggestions Miro board. And please continue to offer thoughts and questions in the group during group conversation and in meeting chat. Of course, raise your hands as you've been doing. However, if we're running low on time, or if you're feeling shy, or if your thought is important but somewhat off topic and you'd like to pitch it for a future meeting, please put it in the box. Or if I have to close out a conversation because of time limitations, that is also a great place to put continuing comments or thoughts or wrap-up questions so that we can continue to address them. We'll compile them and publish them like we did for the last meeting. So thank you. Are there any questions about what I just shared?
Actually had a couple.
Okay.
When it's been a day or two since I looked at the committee pages, but I don't think I saw the March meeting on there. Did you? Is that on there?
It is on there. It's at the in a past meetings place. So the next meeting will be at the top, the upcoming meetings, and then the past meeting is at the bottom. So scroll all the way to the bottom.
Thank you. And thank you for all of your help with my email trauma. The other thing is Jason Callahan is here, but he wasn't able to make the participant code work. So he's an attendee right now. I don't know if there's anything you can do to help him get in as a participant.
There is. Jen, will you elevate him?
Yep, on it right now.
Yeah, thanks for recognizing that, Betsy.
Thank
That's
you.
Great. And just you know, to double down on Liz's request, if there are any questions about changes to the rules, in particular the rules about how we're recording meetings and sharing that out and inviting the public, you know, that's something that you're welcome to voice now or you know, check in with us individually afterwards.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Okay, thanks again for the excellent interaction last month. We supplied some written responses as best we're able to at this moment, recognizing that there's a lot of work ahead. We indicated which questions we're holding for the contractor because the question will be more fully addressed and supported by conversation. However, there were a few questions that made sense to discuss today with you all since they help set the table for the work ahead. Jason will go over some terms and also address at a very high level factors that help distinguish the DEQ and Odo inventories from one another. And we mentioned that there is a fact sheet forthcoming. It is about 2 to 3 pages long that goes into more in depth about the 2 inventories that Oregon has. And that will come as soon as it can. Elizabeth just sent us a message from DEQ yesterday saying that she has access again to her computer. And so that is progress. And so we will get that to you as soon as we can. Jason, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. Just checking real quick, and I get a thumbs up if you're able to access that Miro board. I just see that there's a little equal and slash sign at the end. That's not part of the link. Has anyone been able to click and access the Miro board? Okay, great. Thank you. Just making sure you all have that resource. All right. So yeah, again, my name is Jason Sauer. I spoke last time providing some background information. And so we wanted to respond this meeting to some of the questions that we either had as in several instances or that kind of came up during the meeting last time, either in the form of the whiteboard exercise or in follow-up emails or conversations. So there are 3 sort of tricky terms that all use the term nature that I wanted to walk us through. And there's somewhat nesting, as you can see in this diagram on the right there. I made it before lunch one day, so I think I was just thinking about avocados and colored it that way, but it kind of works. So we have nature-based solutions as the broadest category of these nature terms, which are actions to protect, sustainably use, manage, and restore ecosystems, which address societal challenges effectively and adaptively while providing human well-being and biodiversity benefits. And so that definition actually comes from the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Is well established and used pretty broadly. So an example of a natural or a nature-based solution might be something like planting trees in urban areas in order to reduce air and surface temperatures, particularly during heat waves. We have a subcategory of that called nature-based climate solutions, which are conservation, restoration, and improved management strategies with the primary motivation of mitigating greenhouse gas emissions and to remove CO2 from the atmosphere. So again, it's a subcategory of nature-based solutions. It's the nature-based solutions that are focused on climate mitigation. And so an example of that might be something like cultivating microalgae or algae in the ocean in order to pull some more of that CO2 out of the atmosphere and out of the ocean and store it at least temporarily in an algae system. And so a subcategory of that is the natural climate solution, which from Oregon statute is defined as an activity that enhances or protects net biological carbon sequestration on natural and working lands while maintaining or increasing ecosystem resilience and human well-being. And emphasis here is mine, but it's also reflected in the literature. Natural climate solutions are not meant to move ecosystems further from their natural state. And so that's sort of the, there are a couple of differences between nature-based climate solutions and natural climate solutions, but that one is highlighted in many locations. So the example I gave for nature-based climate solutions of microalgae, that might, like the abundance of microalgae in the ocean that you're farming in order to do that nature-based climate solution, may actually be beyond the amounts or have other environmental effects that would disqualify as a natural climate solution, which is supposed to value the maintaining or increasing of ecosystem resilience and human well-being. I did not include I did not provide a response about what makes me think of spring earlier, but a good example of a natural climate solution might be removing invasive species, such as I am doing currently by weeding in my yard, which is my clearest sign of spring, is having to hop on that duty. So hopefully that clarifies some things. We can take questions on this more later. And again, we have additional documentation coming up. Can we go to the next slide? So other words that were specifically mentioned in the statute and that we've received some questions about are these two here, which are activity-based metrics and community impact metrics. And just for broader context, these are metrics that we're going to be developing as part of a forthcoming RFP related to natural climate solutions in Oregon on natural working lands. So activity-based metrics are metrics that are used to track the implementation of natural climate solutions. They can be converted to a carbon dioxide equivalent metric through a chosen method or calculation. So in this example, we have in the image here of cover cropping on agricultural land. An activity-based metric that would be appropriate for something like that might be something like acres of cover cropping done. And then we would use some sort of conversion factor or some other scientifically backed method to convert those acres of cover cropping into, say, for every 8 acres of cover cropping, you maybe have an additional 2 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent stored on your landscape now. Community impact metrics are much more human focused. And so these are metrics that can be used to track the positive and negative effects over time of natural climate solution implementation on landowners, land managers, and communities. So there may be some cases where an activity-based metric like acres of cover cropping may be the appropriate metric to choose for activity-based and community impact metrics, but there are going to be some instances where they may differ. And again, community impact metrics are much more human focused. So we might be more interested in, how many jobs or how many people are hired either temporarily or seasonally in order to plant those cover crops like over a given season when that natural climate solution is first implemented. And we can talk more about this later, and we will certainly be talking about it a lot more as we get that RFP off the ground and get that work going this year. Next slide, please. Some other terms that I wanted to go through are all related to carbon accounting lingo. There's a lot that get used. Some of them can be substituted for each other, and some just get in conversation mixed up. So we will do our best as we're moving forward to use the definitions that we are forwarding in the glossary that we're sending you and that we're presenting here. So a carbon pool or store is a system that has the capacity to remove or emit carbon. And so in that image on the right, we have 4 pools that I've highlighted here, although there are more. The first is the atmosphere, second is biomass, third is ocean pool, and then fourth is the soil pool. And a carbon stock in those pools is the amount of carbon in particular that is there. So you might have a million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent stored in the soil. Carbon flux and stock change is the movement and exchange of carbon between different pools over time. So emissions are sort of a subcategory of that, and they're specifically the greenhouse gases that are released into the atmosphere. As you can see from being emitted from the ocean, from soils, and from the biomass. And we have removals, which are greenhouse gases, or specifically carbon dioxide, that are taken out of the atmosphere as part of, say, photosynthesis in the biomass pool from plants. And sequestration and storage are sort of the processes of removing greenhouse gases, specifically CO2, from the atmosphere and storing them in these different pools. And we will, again, try to be using these consistently throughout, but we do understand conversationally they can get mixed up or used more loosely. Next slide, please. And so we also got several questions about the distinguishing between the inventory. And again, as Liz said, we have a document that's going to be coming out. It's a couple pages long that provides more specific and detailed information that distinguish between the DEQ sector-based greenhouse gas emissions inventory and our inventory. So specifically, like, we had to comment that, like, if the inventory work includes both sequestration and emissions, we need to clarify in summaries and language. And we also had requests that we specify that we are focused on landscape-based emissions. So we tried to make sure that that was explicit in the title of our inventory, which you can see there, which is the land-based net carbon inventory. So distinguish between the two, the sector-based greenhouse gas emissions inventory is based on IPCC and EPA guidelines, IPCC being the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and EPA being the US Environmental Protection Agency. The Department of Environmental Quality inventory tracks human-caused greenhouse gas emissions only. They're very focused on greenhouse gas emissions. They don't quantify in that inventory any sort of sequestration and storage currently, but again, they're mostly focused on the human-caused forms of greenhouse gas emissions. The specific aim of that work is to quantify and track greenhouse gas emissions from human activities, and the broader purpose of that is to track historical trends of emissions from human activities, to track progress toward emission reduction goals, and to inform climate policy and develop emission projections. Compared to that, the ODO land-based net carbon inventory, which I believe we are turning into the acronym the LCI, is based on IPCC and EPA guidelines similar to the sector-based greenhouse gas emissions inventory. So we're using methods that are approved by both of these bodies. And our inventory will track landscape greenhouse gas emissions and removals, again, focusing on the landscape component of this and the fact that we're tracking both emissions and removals, recognizing that the land can be a source and a sink. The specific aim is to estimate carbon stocks and the net carbon flux on the landscape. And the broader purpose is similar to the DEQ inventory, which is to track historical trends of emissions and sequestration, from the landscape, to track progress toward additional sequestration and storage on the landscape, and to inform climate policy. In the future, we may add additional purposes to it once we've demonstrated its utility and talked about it with all of you. And so, we're excited to find out what we can do with this and what we're capable of. So I think that's all from me.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason.
Just to clarify,
yeah,
many of the land-based emissions and removals are also human caused. So it's not that they're not human caused, they're just focused on a different set of activities.
Correct. Yes. Yeah, if you take a magnifying glass to the DEQ inventory, our inventory, you will find some overlap and, you know, some general, some activities that might be qualified as one or the other. However, for the sake of seeking a shorthand for this, as we were requested by many members of the commission, we felt like that was the best way to kind of describe it. But you are completely correct, and we'll have more information about this once we send out the full description of the differences between these inventories.
Yeah, the EPA guidelines and IPCC are land use change, and forestry.
Yes.
So that's the broad category, and land use change and forestry are all human activities. So just to make sure folks are recognizing that, you know, but there are things that fall into the sector-based emissions that we won't be tracking.
Yes.
You know, one of the big things in the sector-based emissions is you know, emissions associated with fertilizer application. So we will not be tracking that in the land-based net carbon inventory. That's tracked in the sector-based inventory. But there are other things that are not tracked in the sector-based inventory that we will be tracking in the land-based inventory.
Correct.
Describes why the fact sheet is needed and forthcoming. Is this nuanced, definitely trying to give some high level separation and some grounding from our conversation last week, although imperfect. Betsy, your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Thanks for the overview. You said that you guys had a request that this group only focused on land-based emissions. Did I hear that right?
Incorrect. We had, the request was that if we are including land-based emissions, I probably misspoke there, but just to be very clear here, we had a request that if we are certainly including land-based emissions, to emphasize the fact that we are focused, or that is included as part of our focus.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there space in this for for sequestration in the built environment?
Yes, in the form of, say, like harvested wood products.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think that was, I thought I had two questions, but I'm going to go with that one.
Yeah, feel free to follow up with any other questions in that question box, or just send them to the chat.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one.
Great.
This is Mike. I have one. I don't totally understand the separation here, but track landscape greenhouse gas emissions, does that include farm practices and diesel use?
It does not include fuel usage and fuel consumption on agricultural lands. I forget I'm sorry, I missed the first part of your question there.
Well, that's principally, yeah, farm practice. Well, farm use is what I mean. Farm use of fuels.
Sure. This is kind of where the two inventories have some conceptual confusion to it, and the fact sheet that we're sending out will contain more information about that. The DEQ inventory includes some very specific subset of activities on agricultural lands, and the ODO inventory includes the activities on agricultural lands recommended by the IPCC for tracking under this category, not included in that sector-based inventory.
I think what will be really helpful for everyone is a table.
Yes.
That kind of line items these things, and that is what we have not been able to send out because we really want to make sure we're coordinating with DEQ on that. So
yes.
Thanks for your patience about very specific activities. We are aiming to get you a table like that, but we cannot yet. So forthcoming.
Yeah, we did not want to send anything out without first getting DEQ to agree to how we've described everything. So we're trying to make sure we coordinate our messaging and make sure our methods are consistent.
Mike, to your point, your question, the the fuel use is captured in the sector-based inventory. So it's already captured there, and then we'll capture things like cover crops or other kinds of things that are not captured in the sector-based inventory.
So livestock emissions would be within our ODOE work. Is that correct?
Livestock emissions are actually also captured in the sector-based inventory.
Okay. All right.
Clear as
We
I was
mud.
going to ask about like the nuance there. For example, manure management. If you use manure to make compost and compost application, is that where it would be in the land-based?
I believe all manure management activities are considered captured within the DEQ inventory.
Okay, so digesters and
Yes,
enteric
correct.
emissions. Okay, but
Yeah.
the land itself that they graze on, let's just say it's beef operation, that would be part of the land-based, like sequestration of grasslands, for example.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess my other question I had with my hand raised, in the perfect ideal world, I mean, are we thinking eventually these two might merge into one inventory that we can, excuse me, you know, get one number, or is it always going to be separate?
I don't want to speak for DEQ or the future of what our two agencies might do. I will recognize that other states do have like a total, they approach it in a total carbon budget kind of way. And so since we're just starting and this effort is like 6 months old with staff, I don't want to speak too early, but certainly, you know, there's one option in the future.
And if you look at the EPA inventory, that report that they do, there are all the things that feed into the sector-based inventory, and there's the land use change in forestry. And all of that gets integrated into an overall view of our national emissions, and would also get, you know, we can look at a state base. So integrated in the sense that it's considered collectively.
So
maybe the
listen,
best
Mike,
way.
I have a comment on this though, that it's going to be very difficult to really determine whether it's practical to move ahead with some practices that potentially are going to store carbon if you don't know how much carbon you're using to get there, which is the fuel use on the farm or livestock emissions. So it's going to be really difficult for us to make the case that we are providing a positive result when we don't know what the consumption is.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I see Mike talking more about like the carbon footprint from your operation standpoint. Thank you for that comment. Ellen has had her hand up for a while. I want to make sure we get to Ellen. Ellen, are you there?
Okay, Mike, I asked the question about diesel and tractors last month in the chat and was told that DEQ includes that in the transportation sector. So it's captured, but it's captured with all the rest of transportation, not as part of agriculture, which I don't know is particularly helpful.
We'll note that, Ellen. Thank you. Andrea?
Yeah, this may be a very simplistic way of looking at it, but the DEQ inventory is only, as far as I understand, emissions, right? It's what's going out. So the main goal, right, of the ODO inventory is what we can capture in. And there may be pluses and minuses in that, but the main, I guess, purpose of this is what's the carbon we're storing and how are we changing that? I mean, that's kind of how I look at them.
That's one of the largest thrusts that I think through in that lens. So, you know, what is our landscape currently sequestering and storing? and what can it do more of that in the future. And no one is accounting for that right now, and we would really like to.
Yeah, the only difference I would say is, wildfires, for example, have a lot of emissions. That's not currently captured in the sector-based inventory. It would be in our land-based inventory.
Yes. I encourage, this is a great time for comments, suggestions, and remaining questions on this topic in the Miro suggestion box. We're eating into talking about workforce, and want to make sure we have at least a little bit of flash time for our second Miro board today. So we're going to transition to that right now. As soon as I actually click forward the slides. Okay, I just wanted to kind of remind you, this is the work we have in front of us for 2025, and we're going to focus on the second arrow today. All of this work is kind of, we're going to compile a lot of great information, and it's all going to help the commission with their discussion to establish some non-binding carbon sequestration goals in January. Kathy, did you want to provide some quick history and context?
Sorry. Yes, happy to. So in 2021, well, in 2020, the commission was directed to develop recommendations for the state on a natural and working lands goal for sequestration. And we spent over a year, got input from 1,000 Oregonians, including a big focus on land managers to this work. And one of the recommendations that came out in our 2020, in the recommendations we approved in August of 2021, was to develop a workforce study and to really think about what kinds of workers and training, not just workforce, but workforce and training programs we need to be able to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. And so that was a big piece of our recommendations. And luckily that got carried forward in House Bill 3409, and we have funding to do that work. And it's, everything from heavy equipment operators to seed collectors, and how can we take whatever existing programs we have and amplify those to be ready to do what we think we need to do. So technical assistance providers as well, all of those I think is the part of the workforce and training study.
Right, thank you. So before diving into the RFP components, I just wanted to mention that while there are many things that need to align in order to implement any land-based project, at the most basic level, funding, opportunity, and people are three biggies. And while we all recognize funding is key, and it comes from many sources, private industry, federal public funding like NRCS programs, state grants, or funds like the new Natural and Working Lands Fund, philanthropy or NGOs, the list goes on. Well, opportunity at its simplest level for this type of work often arrives in the form of a willing landowner. So whether private, state, federal, or tribal, when it comes to changing land management or protecting or restoring land for long-term carbon benefits, you really do need someone willing to make the changes on the ground. And no matter what you're doing on the landscape, you need people to do it. So all the opportunity in the world and all the funding from all the sources are meaningless without a workforce to get the job done. So, and in these specific jobs, AI is never going to be able to accomplish them, I think, which is very exciting aspect of the work we're doing together this year. With that said, Odo did not hire workforce specialists. They hired Jason and I to think about carbon all day long. So I'm very excited to learn from the specialists we are hiring shortly and all of you. And however, right now I will run through what we have just asked for in the RFP, which closed a couple of days ago. So the statute asks specifically about the development and training programs that exist or need to exist to support implementation of natural climate solutions. And we are going to deliver a report on that topic to the legislature on September 15th. However, to get to the point where we can identify the workforce development and training programs that support natural climate solution jobs, we need to understand what jobs make up a natural climate solutions workforce, which essentially is an amalgamation of the jobs of all the industries and the nature-based economies that you are familiar with in your specific line of work and interest. The work that will be conducted includes the components you see on the screen. The contractor will work to identify and assess the occupations, special skill sets, and associated job classifications that take part in the natural climate solutions implementation on national working lands. They will identify the workforce development and training programs. They will produce a baseline assessment to estimate the size and composition of Oregon's existing natural climate solutions related workforce. They'll identify gaps, associated needs, either in workers or training programs that hinder implementation, and they will summarize their findings. Part of the work the contractor will be undertaking includes interviewing workers and industries, and brainstorming associated jobs and entities the contractor should interview will be part of our exercise today together. This slide lists the tasks the contractor will likely take to provide us the information that we seek. The proposers to the RFP may offer adjustments to what we have laid out. The tasks start off by clarifying project management, coordinating with ODO, creating a project approach. Task 4 focuses on how they will engage and with who, which includes this advisory committee, as well as conducting interviews with appropriate organizations and individuals to help build occupational profiles and the training program profiles, which will inform the rest of their work, the baseline assessment and their needs analysis. This foundational work will also inform future studies to answer questions we really wanted to ask, like workforce forecasting or projections based on certain investments, but many of these occupations are underreported or not classified well in workforce data sets, which limits some of the questions of interest to us currently. And I'm so sorry if you can hear the device that's going on in the background. So we're putting together the building blocks in place to be able to study more in-depth questions in the future. Some sectors have workforce studies completed or are in the middle of completing them, and we'll be working to coordinate as much as possible with complementary endeavors. These tasks are the tasks the contractor will specifically engage on with the committee. And then you all saw this slide last month, but I'm showing it again now that you have more context. You can see the 4 engagements related to the tasks on the previous slide. Hopefully starting with our main meeting, the contractor will be coming to talk to you about the project approach to on how they will answer the questions that we have. Okay, so I'm doing a time check. We have enough time. All right, so the question for today, who should the contractor interview about occupations and training programs? So first, think of jobs in the land type with which you are most familiar. Who implements a carbon beneficial project? So at this point, do not get too hung up on what a natural climate solution is. If you feel like there's a carbon benefit to the landscape, go ahead and think of that job. That's generally improved land management strategies, restoration or protection or enhancement. Who is part of the project if they don't do the whole project, which is awesome. California is a little bit ahead of us, and we look to them to understand how they have solved some challenges or directions they've taken and approaches they're working on. So Adam, welcome. Please introduce yourself, and I'm gonna go into listening mode.
All right, thanks. I'm gonna share my screen here. So
I'm gonna unshare. Let's see.
okay. Let's see, can I just do this?
Or maybe you can steal it.
How's that? Looks like I'm sharing.
Good, you did it. Good, you stole it.
All right. Challenge 1 complete. Yeah, so thanks for having me. I'm Adam Moreno, and I'm the manager of nature-based strategies at the California Air Resources Board. If you're unfamiliar with the California Air Resources Board, or CARB, we do a lot of things. You know, we obviously are our air quality primary agency to improve air quality around California. We're also the state's lead climate mitigation agency. And so in that vein, we administer a lot of different programs that you may have heard of: cap and trade, offsets, low carbon fuel standards, all sorts of stuff. And we also do a lot of work in California's natural and working lands. And so before I begin, also just a little about me so you know who you're talking to here. I'm actually from Oregon. I grew up in La Grande, Eastern Oregon. And through college, when you could fight fire as a summer job, I was a hot shot. And so here's just a picture of me. I think in front of Mount Hood. It might be Mount Jefferson. I can't remember. It all blurs together. So anyways, super excited to be here and, you know, help Oregon as I can, you know, move natural and working land stuff along. So, all right. So the group that I manage within CARB has a few different responsibilities. So we keep the natural and working lands carbon inventory, and we also are in charge of what we call the scoping plan, which is our sort of our strategy. We're in charge of the natural and working lands component of that. So we use that to set carbon targets for into the future. And I'm going to talk about each of these items as we go along. We also have to track and assess the impact of land management activity. And then we also provide a lot of science and technical and policy support across state and federal government in California, well, even local jurisdictions as well. And so, yeah, for example, we set some nature-based solution targets, which I'll also talk about here a little bit later. So to frame up what we're talking about when we talk about natural and working lands, you know, this discussion you all were having about the boundaries between your sector-based inventory and your natural and working lands inventory, super familiar. We're still having that discussion, okay? So as you build these things out, you know, you'll find more and more like overlap or places where these boundaries come together. However, in its most general sense, this is how we think about natural and working lands. It's basically every ecosystem, all lands in California. We bin them up into these groups. These groups are defined by IPCC. And we actually kind of take this as general guidance and we modify it a bit for our own purposes. And I'll touch upon that a little bit as we go along too. This is also a common source of confusion when talking about natural and working lands inventories. So there could be a couple of different ways you do it. So one way is with this map on the left here. So let's say your state funds a lot of different projects, right? These are healthy soils, healthy forests, and you quantify the benefit of all of those projects. Okay. That takes a lot of field data, right? Pretty intensive, like on the ground information. And then what your state staff would do is they just aggregate all of those project level benefits up, and then that could be your statewide inventory. This inventory will always show a carbon benefit from natural and working lands because you're only counting the area within the boundaries of projects. Okay. That's not what we do in California. We do what's on the left, or sorry, the right here. This is to say, we want to know what the carbon change is everywhere, every square inch of California. That is our objective. And so we, of course, count what's in project boundaries, but we don't count it any differently than what we're counting outside of project boundaries. And you actually have to do your inventory this way if you also want to take into account the cost of inaction, right? So there's a lot of places in California that will never do projects, or they might, you know, have bad land management practices. Also, wildfires. You know, wildfires typically happen where you don't do projects. And so you have to be counting your carbon everywhere if you want to be tracking the full carbon balance of your state. And that's a different methodology that goes into that. And that's what we're doing in California. And so this all is trying to get us to carbon neutrality by 2045. That is California's legislatively mandated objective. And so here's our very simple equation of how we think about carbon neutrality, with a lot of complexity underneath each of these circles. But essentially we have what we call our AB32 sources, which we have our AB32 inventory, or what we just call a greenhouse gas inventory. This is what you're calling, I think, your sector-based inventory. And so these sources that are in that inventory are defined by legislation. This is fossil fuels, landfills, dairies, and then there's a few other things that are kind of built in there. But then we have plus or minus natural and working lands. Plus or minus because natural and working lands are not necessarily a sink of carbon, okay? Sink or source. And then minus any other carbon removal that we can get, technological solutions or otherwise. And so here, it's important to note that in California, our objective for nature-based strategies, that's the overarching, our strategy for using nature within a climate context, is not to maximize carbon stocks and or sequestration everywhere, but to enhance the health and resilience of ecosystems and communities that will then lead to long-term sustainable carbon stocks. So that is to say, when you're creating a statewide strategy for how to manage all of your lands, carbon is an important metric, but is not the only metric to think about. And in some cases, it's not the most important metric. And so we want to enhance the health and resilience of ecosystems and communities first, and then we calculate the carbon consequences of us improving ecosystems and communities. Okay, so a little bit about our natural and working lands carbon inventory. So all of this work started in 2006. That was when we first had our legislation that mandated all of this climate work. The governor signed that back in the day, Arnold Schwarzenegger. And then so we had our first sort of informal, so that is to say not necessarily published, but internal accounting natural and working lands inventory in 2010. And I wanted to just kind of note here the progression of the resources we had here. So this also started with just a contract and one staff. So similar to Oregon, but you have 2 staff already. So you're already ahead of the game from where California was when we started. Okay, so but then we published our first like public facing inventory in 2018. And that had really just 3 staff and a manager. But it built off of all the contract work that was done. And so as you build out your inventory through your contract, I would recommend that it builds tools that then your state staff can use in-house to update through time. So you don't have to just do contracts over and over again. And then we are currently now updating our natural and working lands carbon inventory to be published late this year. And now we have 12 people working on the inventory. So all in-house. So a little bit more about the inventory, what we're actually quantifying. So we quantify carbon stocks and stock change. We do not do greenhouse gases. So to be able to do greenhouse gases everywhere in all natural and working lands, the science is not quite there. But this is where we're moving towards. However, we cannot do this at this moment. Again, it's statewide, wall to wall, all of California, including wetlands, not out into the ocean yet, but there's no holding that tide back. Eventually, we're going to have to bring oceans into it as well. And then all ownerships. Doesn't matter who owns it. Like I said, wall to wall. And then we produce it to as current as possible. It's not possible, at least for us and with our methods, to get like up-to-date sort of real-time inventories. So for example, our 2018 inventory, which is our latest published inventory, had up to 2014. So a 4-year sort of lag. Again, this is retrospective, science and objective based. So part of my job is keeping policy, politics, and all of that out of my staff's work, because this just needs to be what is going on with carbon. Doesn't matter what we wish was going on with carbon, right? So totally policy agnostic. And then, yeah, going back to the boundaries, we do plants and soils and harvested wood products, but no animals, no machinery. And yeah, like this question about like, oh, but then, you know, the manure turns into compost, and then, you know, once you spread it back on land, yes, that's when it comes back. That's when it comes back into our inventory. It's the same, just as you said. But yeah, that discussion is familiar to us. This is the kind of thing we produce with the inventory. So on the left is the pie chart of where all of the carbon stocks are in California, at least in 2014. According to our 2018 inventory, you can see 85% of our carbon is in forests and shrublands, and then we break it out into above ground, below ground, you know, soils, and then all the other natural and working lands as well. And then on the right, and this is really the most important part, is that change through time. How are carbon stocks changing? So these graphs are carbon stock change. So that means decreasing lines is a carbon loss from the inventory. Increasing lines mean more carbon in the ecosystem, sorry. And so overall, when you add it all up, we estimate that California's natural and working lands are a net source of emissions. That is to say, we are losing carbon stocks in California. This is from a variety of factors. Let's see. And then I also just wanted to mention, you know, so we do work with our other inventories a lot, you know, the sector-based inventories, the anthropogenic inventories. And natural and working lands carbon accounting is the most difficult, most complex carbon accounting that there is. Because these are systems we did not engineer. We are still figuring out how they function, and it's a massive system. Just to put that out there. Additionally, this inventory here especially is not sensitive to management change. Okay, so that is to say, if you're doing different sort of cropland practices, that does not show up here. Maybe different forestry practices, like if you are extending rotation lengths or something like that, that could show up here. But mainly, in the vast majority of natural and working lands inventories, are not sensitive to management change. They're primarily sensitive to land cover change. So forests change to grasslands, or croplands change to developed lands, or something like that. So that's primarily what we're seeing here. So it takes a lot of work to actually make your inventory sensitive to management. And that's actually one of the big improvements that we're trying to work on right now. And it is not an easy task. Okay. So yeah, some of the improvements that we're currently trying to build in is this previous inventory did not have harvested wood products. So we're currently now building a harvested wood products inventory. And then, yeah, like I said, improving methods to be sensitive to management as much as possible. We're improving the soils component of this, because you can see here the soil carbon stocks are actually the biggest single pool in California. However, our methods back then especially were not great. And soil carbon is the hardest pool to quantify. Of all of our new staff, we've really leaned into the soil carbon piece. And so we have a lot of effort going into mapping and quantifying soil carbon stocks through time. So that's one of the big ones. Also, wetlands. Wetlands are extremely hard. During this inventory, the only wetlands we really included were in our delta, our Bay Delta, so that's around San Francisco. And that's because that is the most studied ecosystem in the entire state of California. But we have wetlands everywhere in California, but we just didn't have the science to include them yet. But now we're kind of doubling our efforts there. Also doing things like capturing post-fire deadwood, that's a challenge. And so we're trying to improve on that. Let's see, what else? I have some notes here of things to include. So yeah, some of the most challenging ecosystems to include in a natural and working lands inventory, for sure, croplands. And that's primarily because of data sharing issues. So, it's fun working in natural and working lands generally because you get to work in every single ecosystem, and every single ecosystem has a different community and a different culture around them. Some cultures and communities will happily throw data at you and throw their models at you. Everything's open source. Please use it. We want it to make big decisions. The cropland community is not like this. And I'm not even talking about just farmers. I'm talking about researchers as well. And so it's been a lot of trust building and relationship building to get to a place where we're now getting more data where we can do a better job there. Like I said, wetlands also difficult. Yeah, soils, urban greening also challenging. We can do like urban tree canopy relatively well. Other forms of urban greening, slightly more difficult. Yeah. So, and I've shared this with Elizabeth and Jason before, actually, in the past, which is sort of how we assess inventory and think about where we can improve. And so this is now the advice I give when I speak with other states about how to start an inventory or improve an inventory. And first, you got to start with your questions, because there's a million different ways you can do carbon accounting in natural and working lands. I mean, honestly, it's endless. But what is it that you really want to know? And can your inventory answer that question? And if it can't, what are these things? So this list of things below need to change so that you can answer your question. Maybe, you're not including everything wall to wall. So your spatial scale needs to broaden. Maybe you don't have enough change through time. So you need to increase the length of your inventory somehow. Or maybe you want to ask more spatially disaggregated questions. So you need better spatial resolution. Same with the temporal resolution. Thematic resolution is more like, what carbon pools are you counting? Maybe you don't even have soil carbon, and that's something you need to add later. sensitivity, like I said, are you sensitive to the drivers of change in your state, whether that's climate, management, something else? And then practical considerations. You know, you have 2 staff. Can you actually take this inventory and turn the crank however many times? Is it an annual inventory? We don't do this annually, by the way. Like I'm committing, even with these 12 staff, to do it every 5 years. Huge effort to do this. And also there's a signal to noise benefit here, right? These are huge systems. Even with big fire years, you know, maybe, you know, you get a little wiggle, but is it worth it doing every year, you know? Okay. Now moving on to setting carbon targets. So like I said, we have this process we call the scoping plan. It sets our roadmap for reaching carbon neutrality. We also do this every 5 years. First one was in 2012. The most recent one was in 2022. And the last one in 2022 was the first one to include natural and working lands. And that's actually because that's when our mandate for carbon neutrality actually kicked in. So before that, our objectives were all about decreasing emissions, right? Decreasing emissions on the fossil fuel side, whatever, AB32 sources, what we call them. That doesn't require natural and working lands, right? But once you say you want to be carbon neutral, now all of a sudden you have to count your entire carbon balance. That's where natural and working lands comes in. Again, here we model every single ecosystem into the future under climate change, different climate scenarios, different emission scenarios, different management scenarios. And in this analysis, we assess carbon, we assess greenhouse gases, because this is future projected, not real. You can do greenhouse gases. And then we also have to do, by law, a public health and economic analysis. After we went through that whole process, which was the hardest professional thing I've ever done in my whole entire life, we came up with a target for natural and working lands, which is losing no more than 4% of carbon stock from 2014 to 2045. One thing that came out of this is that science is telling us we are going to lose carbon in California for the foreseeable future, no matter what we do. The question is, how do we want to lose that carbon? Do we want to lose it through drought-induced mortality, crop failure, catastrophic wildfire, or do we want to lose it through fuel reduction projects, biomass utilization, you know, and building out some jobs throughout California? And I should say there are a lot of drivers to this change. I mean, wildfire, of course, gets like all of the headlines, and it is an important driver of change, but management is also a big driver of change. Management has a huge impact on carbon stocks. Additionally, really the more existential problem is just drought. Just drought-induced mortality is really the big thing that is going to hammer our natural and working lands. And that never gets the big news because it's just sort of dead trees and plants everywhere. But that's really what's going to be driving the majority of our change. So after we came up with our carbon target, we then worked with all of our state agencies, really like the vast majority of them. I mean, so I think we worked with something like 80 state agencies, lots of politics here. Also, we had an expert advisory committee working with stakeholders to come up with nature-based solution targets. So we had a carbon target that had sort of a suite of recommended practices associated with it, but now we wanted to really nail down how many acres of treatments do we want in California every single year. And so we have a whole report here. This is all split out into more detailed information. This is just the sort of the take-home slide. So it's a lot of wildfire fuel reduction, it's restoration, conservation, healthy soils practices. That's, you know, primarily ag land. We're also shifting agriculture into organic production. There's some afforestation, there's urban greening. I would say nothing here is prioritized. That's all important. And so, like, for example, even though the wildfire fuel reduction is the most acreage, the urban greening is by far the most expensive. So we could do this in dollars, which we don't here because we want to track acres. But in terms of dollars, the urban greening probably will be the most expensive. But anyways, in 20 years, basically, we want to see half of California receive some sort of nature-based solution. To get to some of the policies that are currently being used to implement some of this, you know, this is all providing the information needed for our advocates and legislatures to make decisions to get resources into this sector. Okay, so one of the things that happened is last year, California passed a $10 billion climate bond. So this is towards all sorts of those practices that we showed, that I just showed earlier. Additionally, we do have our offset program, but that's a national program. A lot of projects are in California. In fact, half of them have to be in California. And so to date, we've issued about 270 million credits. Hard to say how much money that really equates to, but the average price per ton per credit is $34 to $16. We also have our cap and trade program. And just to give you a general magnitude of what that brings in, we have quarterly auctions, and the last quarterly auction brought in $580 million. That directly goes back to climate projects. So this is what funds in California all of our healthy soils programs, all of our urban greening, well, state-funded urban greening, all of our healthy forests, and a lot more. Without cap and trade, we would have a hard time getting anything done. Also, other policies we're implementing, cutting the green tape, so trying to improve our permitting processes while still maintaining our environmental standards. We also have, in its very nascent stages, a carbon registry that's sort of similar to a voluntary carbon market registry. It's not really a thing yet, but it's something under development. We have our low carbon fuel standard, which will now have a woody biomass pathway with time, and to use those wildfire fuel reduction project feedstocks. We also have a new corporate climate reporting program, which is also just starting up. So this is all of the big companies in California having to report their emissions and their climate risk to their companies. We're hoping that that will then spur also more projects for companies to reduce their climate risk and reduce their GHGs. Also, insurance markets are moving a lot of things. We also leverage federal funding where we can, and also a lot more. So workforce, like you were all talking about today, TA, pilot projects, research, things like that. Tracking progress, lots of ways to different track progress. So we have to have management data to quantify the full contribution of natural and working lands to carbon and other metrics yet to be specified, like catastrophic fire severity reduction, for example, or just fire risk reduction. And many actions cannot be quantified or identified with remote sensing. So that means a lot of management you have to have reported data from. In this sector, we don't have like a mandatory monitoring and reporting system like we do in other sectors that we regulate in California, like oil and gas and things like that. And this is important because on average, forest management, for example, actually impacts more carbon than wildfire emissions on average in California. Additionally, there are many reporting systems you probably have throughout your state of agencies trying to keep track of money spent or something like that. But a lot of these systems, and this is what we have in California, are not sustainable or useful, honestly. And so we're right now undertaking a massive effort to try to standardize reporting data in this sector so that we can actually track progress towards all of the things that we're doing, but also quantify the impact or the contribution of natural and working lands fully to carbon neutrality and all these other metrics. And I'll stop there.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. That's a lot to take in.
Yeah, great presentation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there questions?
Mike, I have a question.
Great.
Somebody else just said they had a question, right? Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mike. I'm just speaking. Yep.
In your slide there where you showed a very drastic decrease in carbon in forest and natural lands, I presume the biggest loss there is wildfire. Is that right? Or it's a combination of everything?
Yeah, so it's a combination of everything. So in this inventory, we just track that change, and we don't do that extra step of attributing that change to anything yet. However, yeah, wildfire is a big one here. But again, we had a massive drought-induced forest mortality event in 2008, also in the Southern Sierras, that just sort of decimated wide swaths of forest. And so that's also reflected here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jazz?
Hi, Adam. Thank you for the great presentation. This is Jasmine here. This is a few steps ahead for Oregon, but you spoke to fine-tuning the inventory to capture management practices as opposed to kind of a more coarser land use change. And I'm curious if you have any kind of pointers for Oregon, if how we should be thinking about this earlier so that we're not, we can start implementing whatever it is that you need to do to get to management actions, before we get there.
Yeah. So, and I even tell this to my team currently, we have to first look for what we think those largest drivers of change are. What are those biggest management practices that we think are affecting carbon, and try to incorporate that first, and then, sort of prioritize in that way. Yeah, so I guess, yeah, I mean, the easiest thing is to use remote sensing as much as you possibly can. So that should be built in. But especially like in agriculture, you need to already start working with that community to somehow eventually get, especially like fertilizer use and irrigation practices. These cannot be remotely sensed, and they have a massive impact on N2O emissions, which is really where all the climate action is in croplands. Soil organic carbon in croplands, yeah, okay, it's a thing and it's important, but N2O emissions are really, that's the thing driving GHGs, and you can't get that really very well without some sort of reported data.
Thank you. Dean?
Yeah, thank you, Adam. This is very interesting stuff, and kudos to you and your team. I'm hoping that I didn't understand something right here, but early on, one of your slides was a very simple equation of emissions plus or minus like natural and working lands minus other carbon removal, which I assume is technological kinds of things. And then you said that the best that you can hope for is an increase in 4% emissions from natural and working lands. Did I hear that right?
So You heard it almost right. So it's a decrease of carbon stocks by 4%. When we don't want to lose any more than 4%, that's our target. Anyways, that's not quite GHGs. So technically, we can't even really do this equation yet, actually. Because to do this, we have to be able to calculate GHGs from natural and working lands. And like I said, we don't do that. We do that for fire specifically, but we have a whole other group in CARB that does fire emissions, and they do that for air quality purposes, and that's why we have it. But yeah, that is what it is.
So that's kind of depressing. I mean, I think we're on this committee because we're hoping that in Oregon, the natural and working lands number there will be a big negative. So it sounds like what in California anyways, what to get to zero there in carbon neutral, you're going to need some kind of technological fix, that other carbon removal. Is that right?
That's how the math is working out. I will say that when we started this work, before we published the official inventory, that is exactly what people thought in California as well, that we will drive down emissions as much as possible. There are some emissions you just cannot get rid of. And natural and working lands will just take up the rest. But once you start doing the science, it's just not there. So yeah, this was also a very, let's say, disappointing finding, but it's borne out not only in the inventory, but also in the future projection modeling, which are related but independent. Additionally, other research also is showing that we're likely to lose carbon in the future in our natural and working lands. And so that's just what it is. So again, this is also one of the important places, and I mentioned that the inventory has to be completely policy agnostic, right? You got to quantify what's really happening, no matter what you wish was happening. So, and that bore out in California here.
Okay, thanks, Adam. It's good to have knowledge, even if the knowledge isn't what you hoped for.
That's right.
I think Jocelyn has her hand up. Before I do that, interject a little bit of hope in that I think it's important to also couch this work in the greater resilience efforts that we have to protect ourselves and our lands as climate changes. So it's important, I think, always to keep this work in context of everything that our natural working lands provide to us. Yeah, there are other challenges, right? That plants sequester less carbon as we get hotter. So that's probably something that Adam was alluding to. And so I think just trying to keep that that larger perspective about our effort can keep the fire burning under us too.
Just
yeah,
a
great thing.
quick addition, Elizabeth.
Yep.
Right now, our forests in particular are providing a lot of offsets, and we're more and more susceptible to fire going forward, so we have to pay attention to the impacts. But right now, our land base is providing, with a combination of less fire and less conversion, given our great land use laws, we're in a better shape. We're in better shape than California, but we can't ignore the fact that we should be paying attention to it.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. Jocelyn.
And well, yeah, just real quick, just to build on that. Yeah, thanks for that, Elizabeth. So right, like in California, especially like in our forested ecosystems, so one of the first things I did when I worked for California is I had to write a history of fire for California and biomass and things like that. And right now in California, or at least in the early, since 2000s, I guess, recent history, we have the highest levels of biomass that California has ever seen, basically in the last few thousand years, right? And that's because of fire exclusion and just, whatever management practices. So we, in a lot of sectors, want that carbon to come down because of what Elizabeth was talking about, the trade-offs between carbon and all of these other ecosystem services. We want to reduce that catastrophic wildfire risk. And to do that, we have to reduce fuels. And that is just a carbon loss. There's no way around it. Even if you account for avoided emissions, increased growth, whatever, we are removing carbon from the ecosystem. And that's just all there is to it. So that bathtub ring will go down. But the trade-off is safer communities, healthier ecosystems, more sustainable ecosystems. So yeah, just because you're losing carbon doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing for ecosystems or communities. And that's why also I preface this that carbon is important when you're thinking about natural and working lands, but it's not the only thing to think about. And sometimes it's not the most important thing to think about.
Thank you, Adam. Jocelyn?
Sure. I guess just a few comments. The first, the timeline is also a bit staggering, recognizing the law was passed, I think, 2006, and your first report a few years later, and then internal reports. So, it seems Oregon has a much more advanced timeline than 16 plus years. So I don't know if you have any lessons learned for us. That's one question. And then the other would be, you talked about a lot of the numbers have to do with conversion. And I'm wondering, was part of that conservation goal also including conversion of agricultural lands to urban? And is there a goal related to that for California of helping prevent that from happening through voluntary easements?
Yeah, great. So first of all, with the timeline and Oregon having a more advanced timeline, more aggressive timeline, yeah, this does take time and work. There's no sugarcoating that. However, Oregon's in a better place than we were in California, right? When we did this in California, there was nothing to look to at that time. However, one of our explicit objectives in CARB and with all of this climate work is to help other states accelerate faster. And so, I've already offered to Oregon everything that we have. So, like, you can take all of our code, our data, whatever. It's still under development right now, at least all the new stuff, but at least we'll have something at the end of the year, and it's all going to be open source. We have a explicit criteria that we only use open source data, open source products for this explicit reason, to help states like Oregon, Washington, that's doing the same thing right now, and other states across California, or sorry, across the U.S. So there's that. We'll help out as much as we can. I will say, yeah, it does sound like you're aggressive, but that's fine. You just start as good as you can. You just get something out there, and then you just iterate it, make it better. So that's what we do.
Thank you, Adam. I often say first generation inventory because we are on a journey and we'll be on a journey together for a while. So, and also thank you for how much your aim is to help other states. Mike.
Yeah, looking at your numbers on the acreage and so forth for afforestation, et cetera, is there a way that a lot of the California farmland that may not have enough water can be converted to woody perennials that may be somewhat drought resistant? And is that in your calculation?
So the afforestation piece, which, I learned a lot as we did this, that maybe actually afforestation is a bad title for this. But this is really about restoring oak woodlands in California, especially in degraded rangelands, or I should say grass and shrublands. which are really pretty extensive in California. So this is would not then be in croplands, for example. Yeah.
Well, do you perceive that there's a way that there's a lot of really low value agricultural products where nobody's making any money? And do you perceive there's a way to get carbon payments to convert a lot of these acres to woody perennials?
Well, so we're not trying to do any crop conversion sort of policy making here, because that's really a market driven decision. We would like to see more woody or perennial things like hedgerows, windbreaks, buffers between agricultural systems and communities. That's actually part of the afforestation as well. But you know, in California, we have a really big groundwater problem. And so actually we had historic orchard planting in the early 2000s. So we have this, you know, massive, especially almond and walnut and even pistachio crop right now that actually they're being removed because our groundwater supply is being, you know, hit pretty hard.
Interesting, thank you. Checking the time. I just want to offer Jonathan Saul the opportunity to come off mute and say some of the great things he's been saying in chat, but not to pressure you. You just want to put that in chat.
I think everyone can read the chat. Thanks, though.
Okay, great. Adam, thank you so much for this. It's amazing. I'm so glad we're recording it. I think it's going to be such a resource as we work to continue to communicate to everyone interested in this endeavor in Oregon. There's a lot of work ahead. I will take some of your 12 staff. That will be amazing. Thank you. And your budget. Thank you. Kathy, do you have any closing thoughts or other items of business as we close out here in the last 3 minutes?
Yeah, thanks, Liz. Lots of things to think about, lots of experience that the California team has had that we can learn from. So it's so great to have had you join us for the conversation, and I think, you know, continuing to kind of connect in an ongoing basis would be super helpful. So thanks to everyone for the great questions and comments, and also for the presentations. We're on that. You know, and I guess the only other point I would make is, like we heard around the natural and working lands inventory, the improvements that have been underway in the sector-based inventory that DEQ does, or that, you know, has been happening in California, you know, that is, it's an evolving process no matter what sector you're in, and we can only get smarter and better involve and adapt the methodologies. So I think this is a good, it's good to just reflect on the fact that we're all going to be trying to improve. We don't have to be perfect out of the gate, but we can improve over time.
Thanks for that, Kathy. All right, you'll get the meeting minutes from me next week, and thank you all for coming today, and have a great Friday afternoon. Bye, y'all.
You all.